All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad to virtually see your names. I guess that's all I get to see tonight. I saw a few people flash on for a second. Glad you could join us for the Grit City Think and Drink tonight. I'm your host, Jim Gowell, coming to you from Whidbey Island, where I'm taking a break from my COVID house and actually getting out to a different part of Washington. So I am live streaming from near the water where it is gale force winds, so I'm not going outside anyway. Welcome to the Grit City Think and Drink. Just so you know, this happens every second Tuesday of the month. We have our last talk for the 2020 season is happening December 8th. That's from Dr. Carolyn West, and she's going to be talking about Black pornography, actually, and the sexualization of Black women in that. Pretty amazing talk. I've seen her give some of her presentations before, so I hope you'll join us in December for that. And we are currently looking for speakers for the 2021 season. So if you know somebody, if you are somebody who would like to give a talk on a particular topic that you know really well, just email me. My email is there on the screen, and let me know what your talk idea is and what months might work for you in 2021, and we'll get a schedule set up so that we can advertise the first talks at our next talk in December. So hopefully you have some great ideas and you can let us know. So the way this goes, for those of you who are new to the Grit City Think and Drink, is that I'll introduce Allison. She will give an amazing talk, and then we will take a short break, and I will come up with a random way to give away some prizes. And yes, we still give away prizes even though we're not doing it in person. So I will have you text me, chat me your mailing info, since I'm the only one who can see your info in the chat. So if you win one of those prizes, I will send you that stuff. And so I don't have them with me today, but what we have right now are the logo you can see over on the screen there, the Grit City Think and Drink, and their socks. So they're the coolest purple socks you will ever see. Limited edition. So once they're gone, they're gone. So I hope that you can join us and stay around for that. And so once we give away that swag, then we will have a question and answer session with Allison, and you can try to stump the expert about beluga whales and her citizen science project. So welcome to everybody, and I will introduce our speaker. So our speaker, Allison Gardell, is a newly hired, yes, she is, brand new, started in a very interesting time. She started this quarter, assistant professor in the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at UW Tacoma. She earned a BS in Marine Science and Biology from the University of Miami, which is the exact same weather as we're having right now. And a PhD in marine ecology from UC Davis. Allison completed a postdoctoral position in ecotoxicology at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Prior to joining the faculty at UWT, she was an assistant professor at Kenai Peninsula College. Allison's research utilizes an integrative approach to understand mechanisms of toxicity that affect the health of aquatic organisms. And if you ask her really nicely, she can take you home to see her pet beluga, which is in her apartment right now. So without further ado, I give you Allison Gardell.
All right, thank you, Jim, for the introduction. I'll go ahead and share my presentation.
Yep.
Everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really excited to share the work I've done up in Alaska on beluga whales. I'm really happy to be in the Tacoma area. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to connect with a lot of you folks as of yet, but hopefully those interactions will come pretty soon. So today we're going to venture up to Alaska's Cook Inlet. I'm assuming a bunch of you have been to Alaska before. Cook Inlet is right here. It's about 2,500 miles from Tacoma. I'm very familiar with this mileage because I just took the opposite trip down south from Anchorage to Tacoma. I drove through Canada during a pandemic. No, I would not recommend doing that if you have an opportunity. We can talk about that later. Anyway, so this is the Gulf of Alaska here. We have Prince William Sound shown here. So this is Cook Inlet again. You have Anchorage. This is the largest city in Alaska. This is Kodiak Island here. And then we have the Alaska Peninsula down here. At the very end, you have the Aleutian Islands. So Alaska is a very big state, as you know, and many diverse species and ecotypes within the state. So tonight we're talking about whales, and there are 90 different species of cetacea. So the order of cetacea includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Tonight, our star is the beluga whale. You can see beluga whales look quite different than the other whale species. So getting into beluga whales a little bit, they are part of the Odonocete division of cetacea. So cetacea are divided into filter feeding baleen whales, which are called mysticetes, and then the toothed whales, which are called the Odonocetes. So beluga whales are considered Odonocetes. They have teeth like us, but the way they use those teeth is a little bit different. They use them to capture their prey. They can destroy their prey to some degree, but they don't chew their food. They ingest it whole for the most part. Beluga whales share the family Monodontidae with narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, so the ones with the really long tusk. So belugas and narwhal are in that family together. As you can see, belugas have a very distinct white coloration. So no other cetacea has this bright white coloration. The coloration is actually a proxy for age we see though in these animals. So younger individuals, like this calf here shown with the mom, they are a darker color, a gray color, and this helps them camouflage as they follow their mom in the shadow of mom. So the bright white color helps the adults camouflage in their Arctic and subarctic environment, which is often ice covered. So this white color helps them camouflage in with the icebergs and the ice sheets. If you look at the dorsal side of the animal, you can see there's no dorsal fin, which is quite unusual for whales and dolphins, right? So if you look at this here, this is called the dorsal ridge on the dorsal side. So no dorsal fin, and that helps the animal navigate under ice. So it can maneuver under ice. It doesn't have this fin getting in the way. And if it needs to create a breathing hole, a hole in the ice, it can use this dorsal bridge, which is really reinforced, so it can break through that ice. If you look at the frontal region of this animal, this forehead region, there's a frontal prominence, and this bulge that you see in the head, it sticks out because of a sensory organ called the melon. And the melon is like an acoustic lens. It helps focus the sounds that are generated by the animal and used for echolocation. So those beams of sound are going to be emitted to the environment. They're going to bounce off of objects and then be received by the animal in the lower jaw. That information will then be processed in the brain, and that can help the animal with foraging, with navigation. If you look at this water here, it's very murky. So Cook Inlet, for example, has silt as its primary substrate. And that makes it hard for the beluga to see where it's going and where its food is at. So this echolocation really helps with foraging and navigation. These animals can live to about 50 years old. We can look at their teeth for aging. They deposit growth rings like a tree in their teeth. And so you can look at those to see how old the animal is. There's new research being done where you can actually look at the DNA, the chemical signatures of the DNA, methylation of the DNA, to also proxy for age. These animals are highly social, like other marine mammals. So you don't typically find them alone, but you find them in larger groups that are called pods. We typically see belugas in pods ranging from 10 animals to up to 50 or more, depending on the area and the time of year. They are opportunistic feeders, meaning whatever is in season, they are able to eat. So in Alaska, we have a lot of anadromous fish species like salmon and hooligan that come into the freshwater regions for a brief period of time. So those are two of beluga's favorite food items for prey, but they also eat invertebrates like shrimp and octopus. So really whatever is in the area, they will take advantage of that. Belugas are known as canaries of the sea, so they produce a wide variety of vocalizations. I'm going to share some of those with you now. We talked a little bit about echolocation. So when I say click, a click refers to echolocation. So I'm going to play that clip for you right now. All right, so hopefully you're able to hear that. It was a pulse, a long pulse of clicks, followed by a successful kill at the end. So hopefully you heard that prey item being snatched up. And then the second audio clip I have for you is really showing that canary of the sea characteristic, where belugas utilize more than just a whistle to communicate with one another. They can squeak, they can squawk, they can use trumpeter noises, they can use siren noises. They produce all sorts of sounds that you probably didn't think were even possible. So I'm going to play that for you. You can now appreciate why they're called canaries of the sea. I personally think that the second clip would be a really great ringtone for a cell phone. So moving on, I'm getting back to our Cook Inlet beluga whales. Just broadly looking at Alaska, it's good to know that there are 5 different stocks of beluga whales, and I'm showing that in different patterns of blue that you see around Alaska. So 5 distinct stocks of belugas, and the one that we're focused on again is that Cook Inlet population. This is the only population in Alaska that is considered endangered. So it has a threatened conservation status. You can see that it is geographically isolated from the other stocks of belugas. And because of that geographic separation, so this Alaska peninsula that you see right here is an effective geographic barrier between the Cook Inlet population and the Bristol Bay population. So this separation effectively has allowed these Cook Inlet beluga whales to evolve and be genetically distinct than the other belugas. They're an important part of the Cook Inlet ecosystem, and unfortunately we're lacking a lot of really important baseline data on how they use their habitat. Being close to anchorage, we know that they're exposed to stressors, but knowing exactly what limits their recovery is really what we're asking as scientists. So since the 1970s, we've seen about a 75% reduction in this Cook Inlet beluga stock. So they were at about 1,300 animals, and now they're at 279. So it's a pretty drastic drop. And that's primarily due to hunting. In 1972, we had the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that protected marine mammals from things like hunting, harassment, and capture. But even since that Marine Mammal Protection Act, we haven't seen the beluga stock recover. So they were listed under the Endangered Species Act in 2008. NOAA has a lot of work that it directs related to threats affecting the Cook Inlet beluga stock, and that includes habitat loss, reduction in prey, noise. Near Anchorage, we have a lot of shipping, right? Barges that come up bringing our supplies from the lower 48. That plus the road traffic, plus a major airport, that noise gets into the water that the belugas hear. Disease, stranding, so a lot of different stressors that could be contributing to the fact that there are many layers of protection for these animals, but no recovery. So under the Endangered Species Act, NOAA, which is the regulatory agency that manages beluga whales, is able to designate what's called critical habitat for the Cook Inlet beluga whales. So here you can see the Cook Inlet, and the red and the green areas are areas that have been designated as critical habitat. So that's over 3,000 square miles within Cook Inlet, so the majority of Cook Inlet. And the green versus the red just designates differential seasonal use of this habitat by the belugas. So the green areas is where they go primarily in the spring, summer, fall months, where they are primarily foraging. And then in the winter months, they are going deeper into the lower regions of Cook Inlet. So because of the conservation status of Cook Inlet beluga whales, there is a lot of local work that's being done to help with their recovery efforts. And one of those projects I want to make sure to acknowledge is the Cook Inlet Photo ID project. It started in 2005. Tamara McGuire and others lead this work. And basically this project created a photo catalog for the whales that are part of this population. So the dorsal ridge of the animals that I showed you before, it often has scars and natural markings that can be used to differentiate animals. And so when individuals, citizen scientists or scientists go out and photograph these animals, either from the shore or from a boat, they're able to use these photographs to identify the individuals and better understand distribution, habitat use, social structure, and reproduction of these beluga whales. It is citizen engaged, so you can report opportunistic sightings and figure out what beluga you saw from the shore. So they're very interactive with the general public. This is a slide here showing you different individuals that you can see. This is that dorsal ridge region. So you can see the diversity of patterns that occur on this dorsal ridge where you have scars and markings. Treasure, as an example, is a darker individual. So we know, again, color is a proxy for age. So this is probably a younger individual than these other belugas. And then we also see this very unique X mark on the dorsal ridge of Treasure. And that's why we named this beluga Treasure, because X marks the spot for the treasure. So Cook Inlet has a very dynamic tidal range, and it's got mud flats. It gets very shallow in some regions, and belugas, we know in the summertime and the fall and the spring as well, they utilize these near-shore freshwater habitats for foraging. It's sort of like risky predation, you could say. And stranding is definitely a risk for these animals when they come close to the shoreline. So stranding is something that happens every year for certain individuals. Some animals just die of natural causes. Others get stranded during, foraging events. And unfortunately, by the time the tide comes back in, it's too late. Alaska is a hard state to respond to strandings in because it's a very remote state compared to other states like Florida or California, where more things are on the road system. This is an example here of a whale that stranded last year that I was involved with the necropsy of. So a necropsy is just an autopsy on a marine mammal. And the necropsies are directed by NOAA. They work closely with the local veterinary pathologist, Dr. Kathy Burek-Huntington. So she leads the necropsies, but she brings in about 5 to 10 individuals to assist her in sample collection, which is really important because there are so few individuals. If we can figure out why that animal has died, it's really, really useful information. So this one was from Kasilov, and there was another individual a few weeks prior to this one in Nikiski. This one was an older individual, a male, and still don't know the cause of death. I'm not sure if any of you read about this, but there was a beluga spotted off of San Diego several months ago in June. And I hope you're thinking this might be really unusual or strange, or, you know, why is a beluga down south? Yes, that it's correct to be thinking that way. I told you belugas are Arctic and subarctically distributed. So this animal really got off course. It was a drone that spotted this beluga, and it actually turned up dead, unfortunately, in Baja, Mexico. It's presumed to be a Cook Inlet beluga, but we need to verify that using genetic information. So hopefully we'll get news on that soon. This is a happier story. Tyonek is a calf that live stranded back in 2017 in September. He was found without his mother or any other belugas in the vicinity. He was severely dehydrated, he was emaciated, and he had other conditions that were of concern. So he was brought to the Alaska Sea Life Center in Seward, where he was rehabilitated. It was determined that he would not survive on his own in the wild, so he ultimately was transported to San Antonio for SeaWorld. So I'll show you a quick clip on Tyonek's journey.
Has a great story. He is a Cook Inlet beluga whale, and that population of whales is listed under the Endangered Species Act. He was a successfully raised, rescued beluga whale. It doesn't happen very often that we see these guys and that they make it, and for him to be in this position where he's now healthy enough to travel is really cool.
We knew it would be logistically challenging to find other beluga whales to see if we could possibly find his mom. He was definitely a dependent calf, and because the calves stay with mom for up to 2 years and rely on her not only for nutrition but also social needs, as well as showing him where to go and how to take care of himself in Cook Inlet, I knew that his chances of survival on his own were zero.
Fortunately, we have some really strong animals in our pod that are good moms. We have good surrogate moms, and we have some really good role models that he'll be able to follow.
Being able to be a part of his young life, and now being able to kind of see the next big transition for him, taking him from the Alaska Sea Life Center down to San Antonio, it's really special for me. It's really an honor.
So that's a happier story. one of the things that really contributed to Tyonic's success was that he did have some skills when he was found, like suckling, which allowed him to be bottle fed. He is doing well at SeaWorld now, and he's a great PR poster child for the Cook Inlet beluga whales and bringing about awareness for that population. So hopefully now you're convinced that the beluga whale population in Cook Inlet is very unique. And just to remind you, they reside next to the largest city in Alaska, which is Anchorage. Almost 300,000 people live in that city. The habitat that the beluga whales occupy is adjacent to many highway pullouts, docks, the lower parts of rivers. So these areas are really accessible to humans. So you can easily observe these beluga whales during certain times of the year. So given the very limited baseline data and the close proximity to humans, these beluga whales make a really great candidate for citizen science monitoring. So what is citizen science? It's an open form of collaboration where members of the public participate in the scientific process to address real world problems. And in this case, we're using citizen science to help with the conservation efforts for this critically endangered Cook Inlet beluga whale population. So in June of 2019, many organizations came together to form the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership. And this is a collaboration that wanted to facilitate citizen science efforts to monitor Cook Inlet beluga whales from the shore with the help of the general public. So together we worked to standardize monitoring protocols. We also trained volunteers and coordinated monitoring activities for volunteers on a seasonal basis. So here are the partners. There's many nonprofit organizations, including Beluga Whale Alliance, Alaska Wildlife Alliance, and Defenders of Wildlife. NOAA Fisheries is the government agency that oversees beluga whale conservation efforts. So they're an important partner. And then my former employer, Kenai Peninsula College, which is part of the University of Alaska Anchorage, was also a partner. And really the impetus for my involvement with this project was to provide undergraduate research opportunities to students at the college, which is in a more remote area, and those opportunities are harder to find for our students. And then of course, our collaborator, the Cook Inlet Beluga Whale Photo ID project, which I talked about previously. So the objectives of the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership is one, to generate baseline data on habitat use of belugas, their behavior, and any anthropogenic disturbances that occur in the areas that belugas utilize. And also to, importantly, increase public awareness of these endangered Cook Inlet beluga whales in order to promote conservation efforts. So how does the partnership work? Volunteers will sign up. That's the first step. And then it's followed by about a 2-hour training session. So there's an orientation that occurs in a classroom, followed by a session outside. So we'll take you out in the field with a lead observer from one of those partner organizations that I mentioned. And you'll be out there with them for a 2-hour session collecting data. At that point, once you feel comfortable going out in the field on your own, you sign up for additional sessions on the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership website. During the sessions, you record observations using data sheets that we collect or that we generate. And then the data goes into an online platform so that we have an electronic version of that data. As a partnership, we're responsible for quality checking and analyzing the data before we summarize it in a report and then share it with other researchers and managers. So what kind of data are we collecting when we go out in the field? Well, obviously, are belugas there? That's the first question, right? So beluga presence and absence. If belugas are seen during your monitoring session, we'd like to know how many individuals are there. So group size. And the group size can range again from 1 to over 50 or so. And this is probably the hardest part of the data to capture on that form that we've generated. Larger groups, as you can imagine, these animals are surfacing to breathe only for seconds, and you're using binoculars in some cases. Trying to keep track of how many individuals are in a larger pod is very, very difficult, which is why we recommend having multiple animals, multiple observers at a given session so that we can get help or help each other in collecting these data. Behavior is another data collection point for us. So here I'm showing one of my favorite behaviors. This is called spy hopping, where the animal has its head and upper thoracic region outside of the water, kind of checking out the area. This here is called tail slapping, where you see the fluke with some water. On the right here, we have a mom and a calf that are traveling together. So they're right next to each other, side by side. Age class is another parameter that we're interested in. We have the mom here, which is white, right? And then we have a younger whale, which is dark gray. So this is the calf and mom. And again, color is the proxy for age class. And we have broad age categories that we use. We're not asking for a specific age, but just adult, subadult, calf, or neonate. And then human activity. So in certain areas like the Kenai River and Ship Creek, which is near Anchorage, we see a lot of boating activity. We see a lot of fishing activity. We have aircraft flying around. So all of those anthropogenic influences we want to know about and we capture on the form. All right, so our fall 2019 season was the first monitoring season for the partnership. And it ran from August 15th until November 2nd. We had 5 different monitoring stations. So this here is Ship Creek, which is right next to Anchorage. If you go and drive along the Seward Highway towards Girdwood, if you're familiar, this is Bird Point. And then going further south, we have 20 Mile River, which is near Portage. And then going onto this is the Kenai Peninsula here, the central Kenai Peninsula. We have the Kenai River and the Kasilof River. And it's important to know that these are all known foraging areas for Cook Inlet belugas. So there's a good likelihood that we will see belugas in these areas as long as there are prey for them to forage on. So looking at the fall 2019 season, it was a very, very successful. We had over 150 volunteers sign up. We were anticipating about 30 to 40, so we well exceeded that expectation. The vast majority of those individuals went to the monitoring orientation, and most of those folks went on to do at least one monitoring session. We had 76 individuals who completed 3 or more sessions, which is great. And overall, if we look overall at the numbers, we had 269 sessions that were conducted for a total of 545 hours, volunteer hours that were contributed. And each session on average is about 2. So how many belugas did we see? We saw quite a few. We had really good success. We saw belugas on 143 sessions over a 73-day period. So out of that 269 sessions, that's pretty good success. We saw belugas at every site except for the Kasilof River site. And within that, there were 230 beluga groups and over 1,600 belugas sighted. So you may look at this number and say, hey, wow, that's a lot of belugas. Well, there's actually a lot of repeat sightings of the same individual. Remember, there's only about 279 whales in this distinct population. So there's a lot of repeat sightings, which makes sense because certain individuals probably utilize the same habitat day after day for foraging purposes. Looking at human activity, we had 132 groups that were exposed to at least one type of human activity, and then 27 groups of belugas that were exposed to 2 or more activities. So if we go site by site, we can sort of get a good idea here of what we saw beluga-wise. So this is Ship Creek here with Anchorage. So you see Anchorage and then Ship Creek. We had 77 sessions where we saw 23 groups of belugas. That's 75 belugas that we sighted in total. Given this is a large city, there was a lot of human activity that was observed. So we had dredging and shipping, a lot of watercraft were observed. So you can see this is Alaska Marine Lines. We get a lot of our supplies barged up from the lower 48. So you can see those connexes that are filled with supplies. And then right here, you have a beluga fluke visible. So they still hang out in these areas that have a high degree of human activity. This is Bird Point, so going south along the Seward Highway near Girdwood. Here we saw the highest number of belugas, so 978 belugas. There were 127 groups that were observed. Going to 20 Mile River, we saw we had 36 sessions with 32 beluga groups and 170 belugas sighted. Here we had moderate seasonal human activity. So this is a really popular fishing site. We have strong hooligan runs here. So dip netting is a common fishing activity along that bridge area. Here you can see the bridge I'm showing you on the map with the spout of the beluga here. The Kasilof River, unfortunately, we didn't observe any belugas in the 2019 fall season. We did have 15 sessions. It's not a whole lot of hours, boots on the ground. So perhaps we just missed seeing the belugas, or they could be utilized in this habitat during a different time of year. And then the Kenai River, I'm just going to spend a little bit more time on because I was based at the Kenai River campus of Kenai Peninsula College, which is again part of the University of Alaska Anchorage. So the Kenai River was literally in our campus's backyard. My students and I spent a lot of time here doing monitoring sessions and collecting beluga data for the partnership. So the Kenai River is one of the largest and longest rivers in Alaska. It's glacially fed. The lower portion is brackish, so it has a really strong tidal influence. It is home for a variety of different fish species and marine mammals. So belugas and harbor seals are often found in the lower inlet, or the lower river, excuse me. We also see a lot of human activity. So here I'm showing you a picture of dip netting in the Kenai River. So when salmon come in, Alaskan residents can dip net. So they have a very large net with a long pole, and they'll go into the water and wait for the fish to swim into the net, and then they'll fill their freezer for the winter. So you can see it gets very popular, and this is the same habitat that the belugas are trying to get the fish. All right, so this is the Kenai River. If you look here, this is the Warren Ames Bridge. And I mentioned under the ESA, you can designate critical habitat. So beluga critical habitat is designated up to the Warren Ames Bridge right here, but we know that they go far beyond that. So Cunningham Park is one of our viewing locations, and we know they go well above Cunningham Park, upriver. So Cunningham Park is at about 6.5 miles upriver from the mouth of the Kenai. So in our season, we had 73 monitoring sessions where we observed 48 groups of belugas, and that's 386 individual belugas that were sighted. So breaking down the age class, the majority of the whales that we observed were adults, followed by subadults and then calves. Several individuals were unknown age class because it's very hard to see the coloration of the animal when there's a glare on the water. So that's why you see a large number. Observed behaviors, the dominant behaviors are traveling, milling, suspected feeding, and diving. But there were a whole host of other behaviors that were shown as well. Human activity, the majority of that being aircraft and motorized vessels. Kenai has a small airport, so we see flights going in and out on a daily basis. And then it's a big area, a big fishing community. So a lot of boaters, both motorized and non-motorized. So looking at the Kenai River overall, this season really shed light on beluga use of the habitat. They use the river a lot more than we thought, and they go much further upriver than we previously knew. This is a really important foraging habitat. We know the Kenai River supports a whole suite of prey species for belugas, and so it makes sense that they would come into this habitat when there's prey available. So the data that we're collecting here is really important for informing management and policy decisions. NOAA is really interested in the Kenai River and understanding how these belugas utilize the habitat on a seasonal basis. So moving forward, unfortunately, the spring 2020 season was canceled due to COVID, but fortunately, we were able to collaborate with the city of Kenai to utilize their cameras that are positioned on the river for monitoring dip netting. So that picture I showed you with all the Alaskans on the shore, they monitor that with cameras. So they have cameras that are already on the river, and what they did for us was just reposition the cameras at a different angle so we can better see belugas going in and out of the river. So you can actually go on that website, and this is one of the camera views here. You can see the belugas surfacing every so often. This is a group of about 10 individuals. It's pretty hard to observe behaviors from the camera, but at least you get an idea of how many and absence and presence. So that was a really great collaboration that just happened. And I think it's something that we are going to continue working with the city on. Another project that's moving forward with NOAA is an eDNA or environmental DNA study, where we're taking water samples from the Kenai River and we're extracting the DNA to better understand what species are in the river system when the belugas are there. So what prey are they going after? So that DNA will give us basically a panel of species that are found in that sample around that time. And so we're using it as sort of an innovative technique to get at the prey question that we're really interested in answering, especially in times where it's hard to see and observe belugas, like in the winter months. An acoustics project is also being, well, it's just getting off the ground, really. We have a collaboration with NOAA. There's a graduate student who's based at University of Alaska, Fairbanks. who will be deploying underwater passive acoustic monitors in the Kenai and Kasilof rivers. So these are going to record the vocalizations of the whales underwater, and we compare that with the shore-based monitoring efforts. So overall, we can say that shore-based citizen science is a really effective tool to understanding beluga habitat use in the Cook Inlet. And it's also, importantly, a very effective way to build community. I can say from my experience in the Kenai community that we made really strong connections with these individuals and built stewardship for the local environment. So it was really rewarding to have these types of interactions. Belugas were found to be very active throughout the Cook Inlet, including the Knik and Turnagain arms, as well as the lower portions of these large river systems. The data that we generate for the partnership is analyzed and summarized in a report. And one of the major goals of this partnership is to share the data. So sharing it with beluga researchers and managers. The photo ID project that I talked about before, we share all of our photos with that group. And then our database, which is managed on a website, is also incorporated into NOAA's sightings database and ecosystem portal, as well as the photo ID project sighting mapper. So stepping back a bit, I just want to introduce this topic of One Health and how marine mammals and belugas can sort of fit into that One Health perspective. So One Health is the idea that human health, animal health, and environmental health they're all really closely connected, right? So the interconnectedness of these three aspects of health is One Health, and it's a holistic approach to how we think about health. And this is nothing new. It's something that has has existed for many, many centuries. But I think right now with rapid environmental change and changes that we're seeing in climate and species, I think it's an important concept to bring to the forefront. And so using marine mammals like belugas as sentinels for health could be really effective. So what we know about beluga health could potentially help us better understand human health and also environmental health. We know belugas and other marine mammals, living in the marine environment, that's also where a lot of our human population lives, right, along the coastline. And changes that we see in the health of marine mammals might be indicative of the health of the environment that they live in. So NOAA tracks what's called unusual mortality events. So when there's a large scale death event in a given year for a certain species, those are declared as a UME. And so here we're just showing you the number of UMEs across the years. You can see it's usually pretty consistent, although some years are higher than others. And then the various factors that contribute to those UMEs are listed here in different colors. A lot of the time we don't ever know what caused that UME, but sometimes it's human interactions or ecological factors, biotoxins like from a harmful algal bloom or infectious disease. And looking overall, the species impacted, you can see cetaceans are largely affected by these UMEs, over half of the percentage, right? Over 50%. So last year we had a gray whale UME. You might have heard about this. So along the Pacific coastline, we had over 215 dead whales, gray whales that were found. Unfortunately, we don't know what the cause of death is, but to date, we know that it isn't starvation. So still waiting to hear back on this one. On a happier note, yes, we see large-scale mortality events, but we sometimes also see resilience and indicators of improvements in environmental quality. And this is an example of that. So humpback whales for a long time weren't really seen around the New York City area. And recently they have made a comeback. So we're seeing humpback whales in larger numbers. Is this because the population numbers are growing? Is it because the environment quality is improving? What is driving that? But monitoring the activity of marine mammals, especially in these areas that are adjacent to urbanized cities, is really important. And it has implications for human health and environmental health. So thinking locally at the Port of Tacoma, I just want you to think about these questions sort of as the final thoughts for today's talk. Do you think that marine mammal activity is potentially indicative of larger ecosystem health in our region? And if so, what species are appropriate candidates for monitoring South Puget Sound? And these questions don't have a definitive answer, but I think it's worth thinking about. And perhaps the citizen science project that I talked about today with the Cook Inlet beluga whales could help you think about these questions. So with that, I would like to thank my partners at the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership, the collaborators that we have, as well as the citizen scientists who have volunteered their time, the hours they put in to beluga conservation. The undergraduate researchers I worked with at Kenai Peninsula College, thank you for your hard work. I miss you all. And then the funding sources, of course. So thank you to NOAA, NSF, UpScore, and UAA for the funding for this project. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Allison. Let's give it up for Allison virtually. I apologize to everybody who had to witness some of the Zoom bombing that just happened. I think we've gotten rid of everybody, and hopefully that didn't affect too many people going on. I think it was mostly me monitoring everything, but a few people noticed what was going on. I appreciate the help with that. We have, before we get to questions for Allison, we have on display what you're going to win if you win the swag we're going to give away. So Leanne Luxpachand is going to show you, not Zoom bombing, she's actually showing you a pair of the Grit City Think and Drink socks. Thank you very much, Leanne. She was the lucky winner in the past. So we're going to give away a couple pairs of socks. And just so you know, there are two sizes. I don't know why. We have small and we have medium/large. That seems to be the way that they go. So if you win a pair of socks, I need you to send to me, because I'm the only one that gets it, your address so that I can mail them to you and what size you would wear. So for those people that are on the call, we're going to go with everybody. Put in a number between 1 and 15. 1 and 15. We have a 3, a 13, a 9, a 7, 8, 8. All right. So it looks like the lucky winners. So I went with 13 because this Friday is the 13th, and I don't know, that was stuck in my brain. So we have Friday. So it's going to be Grace and Maureen. Grace and Maureen both win a pair of socks. So if you guys can send me the info on how to get you the Grit City pair of socks, I will get them to you in the mail next week. So congratulations to our winners, and thank you all for playing. So then we're on to our questions for the speaker. So Grace asked a question a while back. So are the different stocks of belugas similar to the ecotypes of orcas that we have around here?
That's a great question. I would have to educate myself more on the different ecotypes. I think, are you referring to resident versus transient of orcas?
She says yes.
Yes. I I think that the belugas are definitely more similar in terms of their prey, the, how they specialize on prey and how they go about foraging versus the orcas that are a little bit more differentiated. The issue here is there's, with the belugas, there's either a geographic barrier or also what we've included, some are migratory and others are non-migratory. So there's a few different people say that we think the last
term here was that we did see some volatility in this certainly
all
energy and tech companies, but
whatever is sort of in that area is what they forage on, and that varies as you move northward along the Alaska coastline. So belugas, I would say, are probably a bit more similar than the orca ecotypes.
Next question. Maureen wants to know, what's a hooligan?
Okay, a hooligan is a fish. It's an anadromous fish. It's in the smelt family. It's also known as the candlefish. It's a very oily, and it's, again, a really popular fish to go dip netting for in the 20-mile site that I mentioned.
And Tom asks, he says, very cool research. He's wondering if belugas going upriver is linked to the tide, or do they do fine and pure fresh water, or are they foraging upstream?
Yeah, they're coming into the rivers because they're foraging, but they do time it. It's basically like clockwork. So for the Kenai River, what we saw consistently was they would come in about an hour after low tide, and they would stay in the river for about two or so hours on some occasions. So yeah, they're definitely going in there to forage, but this is unusual for cetaceans. Most cetaceans are exclusively marine, but belugas are able to, they rely on freshwater habitats for foraging. They also, another fun fact about them is that they undergo an annual molt. So they actually shed their upper epidermis. And it's thought that the fresh water helps condition the skin for that molt that they undergo.
Cool. So I had a question for you. So all of the sort of the beachings and things that are going on, I know that you're an ecotoxicologist, so are you involved in looking into what kind of contaminants you might be having in these belugas that you're helping to monitor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to be, however, no, not at this point, have not been involved with that. Most of the ecotoxicology work I've done has been on the fish side, and there have been studies funded by NOAA that are really geared toward belugas ultimately, but looking at contaminant loads in the prey, because a lot of those contaminants are known to bioaccumulate. So contaminant loads in marine mammals is definitely a big issue of concern, especially with subsistence hunting that goes on with Alaska natives, knowing what those levels are and what that means for human health specifically.
Another question from Barb. How do you feel about the Navy getting permission to increase activity in Puget Sound? I don't know if you saw that recently, but the Navy got permission to start doing a lot more activities that might have impacts on orca whales.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion, knowing what that kind of activity does to the animals, it's it's troubling, I would say. But at the same time, we deal with this in Alaska too. We have oil and gas development going on in Cook Inlet, even though that's designated as critical habitat. There are provisions that allow for NOAA to authorize incidental harassment or, harassment of animals. And so it does happen. It's very controversial. It usually, brings debate out within the community, but it's a repeated thing for sure.
And the last question I have is also from Tom. So how do you think the citizen science network of whales in Alaska compares to what's going on with citizen science for orcas in Puget Sound?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm new to the area, so I would love to learn more about the citizen science efforts in the Puget Sound, especially the South Puget Sound, if there's any specific efforts going on. I can say our partnership is relatively new, but it was very successful. I think marine mammals, being charismatic megafauna, they draw the attention of the public, and they can really instill stewardship among citizens. And so I think the fit is really good: marine mammal monitoring and citizen science activity. So yeah, I would love to learn more about the orca monitoring in the Puget Sound, and then I'd be able to, make comparisons between the two programs.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's give a round, well, sort of a round of applause for our speaker, Allison. Thank you very much for an awesome talk. And for folks who couldn't make it, if you have friends that were interested in coming, I know I've heard from several people, the talk is being recorded. And so once we get that converted over to YouTube format, we'll actually put it up on the Think and Drink webpage, and you can check it out there if you missed part of the talk, or you can share it with your friends. So I want to thank Allison for spending her time with us tonight and telling us all about the cool work up in Alaska, and looking forward to learning some more about other parts of your work that you do here and in other places. Thank you all for showing up tonight. I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you all December 8th for our next Think and Drink. And again, if you have ideas for other speakers, love to hear them. Just email me at jimgal@uw.edu, and I will contact folks and see who we set up for the 2021 season. Hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December. Bye, folks.